Armao coming on in the substitution of Armao, young Grig, in for Santorin. Everyone thought it would be a massive downgrade, and you feel for Armao being put in a difficult position, but also he performed well. I think he had multiple steals against Blabber to keep Team Liquid in the game. I felt like he had a performance that is indicative, that was greater than what we've known him for his career, being a guy that can fill in, usually a maybe top 6 jungler, with his time over at EchoFox and TSM, over at Dignitas, and then in a high pressure situation, did good, actually. I think he did good.
I actually feel like there's not that much pressure on him, though, really. Like, I feel like this is actually an easier situation to be in as a player than if he was on, like, a starting team, because there's not much expectations of you, right? Like, you're supposed to get shit on, so you can just play your best and maybe surprise people, but it's not like you're going to get shit on that hard either way. So, like, in my mind, I actually don't view it at, like, I feel like this is a time where I would expect Grig to do all right. Also, the meta, I think, is something that it's not, like, you can't get exploited super hard. There's not too much, like, jungle versus jungle, like, mind games going on. You're essentially full clearing, going to crab almost every single game. Obviously, there's level 1 things that can change, but if you saw, like, the way that they decided to draft, right, like, it was just pretty much ban Nidalee every game and then force chem tank versus chem tank jungler. So for me, I actually think that this is this is like a Grig situation where I feel like he can perform well because he doesn't have the pressure of expectations.
Yeah, I was saying it.
Sorry, go ahead, Alice.
No, I mean, I was saying it before the series started that, before the Team Liquid TSM series. In the current jungle meta of Udyr, Hecarim, Olaf, like whatever, right? There's very little skill expression. It's really, really, really hard to separate yourself, especially early game or even mid game, from other people, as long as you don't really, really, really fuck up. And in terms of like Western junglers, I feel like outside of like Inspired and Tank v Tank, very few people do that in Tank v Tank. So for Armao, it's pretty it's a really fortunate timing for him in the jungle, because if the meta was different completely, right? If it wasn't all farm centric junglers or something, if everyone was playing fucking Sinner junglers, or like just Sinner junglers, right? Or like utility junglers or something of that nature, it's a lot harder to play. But his games here are very streamlined. Full clear into, does my mid or top or mid or bot have prio?
He didn't even play the early games well. Like, that's another thing that I want to throw in here is, like, he survived because, like, the game was going well, but he had, like, a bunch of huge mistakes early game that just because, like, TL was able to win some of those games or, like, go even in some of those games or come back or whatever because their other players are good, he just ended up, like just not getting credit for. Like, imagine doing that, like what he did early to that Renekton, where he goes up to the wave, he's like trying to help Alfari push up top, walks up to the wave, gets one shot by the Renekton, Alfari dies too. Sure, you can always like say, hey, maybe he's being called to do that, but still, like, being able to play the situation well, knowing your limits, like, those are things that I feel like he messed up on really hard, and then he just gets a pass because of what the meta is.
Yeah.
But I mean, one thing I wanted to jump off that point about the or I wanted to like add on to that point about the skill expression in the jungle. I feel like this is actually one of the worst jungle metas we've ever had in competitive play. And the way that I kind of like view it is this, like, normally what you want in competitive play is you want to be able to like see player styles. Like, you can watch a player, and if they're playing in a skill expressive meta, you'll be able to tell the difference, right? Like, let's say you watch like Chovy play a lane and DoNB play a lane, and you have like Showmaker play a lane. If they're playing skill expressive champions, you'll be able to like tell without even knowing, like, seeing their nameplates, which one is which, right? Like, you can tell them apart based on like how they move their champion, the decisions that they make, etc. And that's like kind of what makes League of Legends like an art form. And that's why I like watching League, is because you can see like hints of who the players are, like almost as people based on how they play, like just like their mentalities and things like that. And this is like a meta where and I thought about this earlier. This is literally a literal shower thought. If you take players right now and you look at Elyoya play Udyr, Inspired play Udyr, and Blabber play Udyr, right? It's pretty hard to tell which one's which. You can tell based off maybe like what other people are doing and how the pick is being utilized with their laners, which one is being piloted by which player. But it's really fucking hard to tell compared to like some other things. Like another time that like a champion was meta was, for example, Lee Sin. This is why I think Lee Sin is so healthy for pro play. If you looked at somebody like Karsa play Lee Sin, and then you compared that to somebody like Selfmade play Lee Sin, and you compare that to somebody like Blabber play Lee Sin, right? You have those 3 Lee Sins in 2020. You would have gotten 3 obviously different, distinct play styles where you could see what makes each player good. Like Karsa was more of like the supportive, like he was much better about like covering lanes, like following up on plays, like knowing how to use his laners to set himself up for success. When you look at Blabber, he was a much more like dual heavy Lee Sin, because there's a lot of things you can do with the champion, right? Like Lee Sin could in certain metas 1v1 the enemy jungler, so you could play for like your level 6 power spike and to 1v1 the enemy jungler. You can look for like second respawn red, second respawn blue, pair up with your laners, and you could do something. If you looked at somebody like Selfmade play Lee Sin, he was like the biggest playmaker out of them, right? Like he had probably the smoothest mechanics. You could look at a team fight and be like, okay, look at what the player just did. Okay, that's a self-made Lee Sin. Like even if like, and I'm somebody who's a Lee Sin hater, right? A lot of the times I was somebody who in competitive play, I was like, oh, I don't think Lee Sin's the best pick here. But at least the fact that it was viable allowed for some level of skill expression where I could tell the players apart. Where right now I feel like it's just a complete failure of not only balance, but also like the item changes, because the whole idea was supposed to be item diversity. And I see Chemtank being built in every single game except for the Nocturne game. And I feel like that Nocturne game is a prime example of why people are so unwilling to play it. Sure, the Nocturne wasn't played well, but you have to play so much better, and you can't make even close to the same amount of mistakes if you play like a Karthus and Nocturne. You can't make close to the same mistakes as you can if you play a Hecarim or Udyr, right? Like if you're playing Karthus and you just ult for no reason, like you just do a dumb fucking ult and it's down in the early game, you can lose the game off that. Like it could be like, oh shit, like now our Karthus is just like completely useless. He wasted his ult. Now he's exploitable. He can be like collapsed on in the jungle. Like there's so many things that can happen in the game to hurt him. Whereas like Udyr and Hecarim are so fucking brainless. So I really, really, really dislike the jungle meta. I feel like it's ruining what I want to watch pro play for, which is like seeing skill expression between the players.
So here's one of the things on this topic. Like if you want to talk about jungle meta, I mean, there's other viable junglers, but no one picks them. Mm-hmm. Like, and then you have interviews that come out where fucking Spica says that there's only 4 viable junglers. Maybe in your stunted fucking world of the game, there's only 4.
I mean, if you look at the Nocturne game, right? Like that is literally why people have that mentality, because you saw the Nocturne, like the Nocturne didn't play well, right? Like Blabber fucked up 3 times, but like the thing is the other champions are so fucking like immune to getting punished that when the other champions fuck up, like, yeah, I mean, obviously you should be playing on a level where you're not making 3 blunders in like the first 9 minutes of the game or first 9 levels of the game. But like the other champions don't get punished the same way that like Nocturne does if Nocturne presses R for no reason or something like that.
I mean, there's so many. I mean, Karthus is viable, Evelyn's viable, Fiddlesticks is viable. I mean, Inspired draws bans on it. Lily is viable. Evelyn is viable. Skarner's viable. Ivern's viable. Fucking. I mean, you could go down a list, right? Graves is still like in some spots fine. Kindred is still in some spots fine. Nunu's viable. No one plays Nunu. There's a lot of champions. And I think that the way that metas end up getting reached and people gravitate towards only a very, few handfuls of things is they want to think that they're only losing to other people because the champions that the other people are playing are better. And so everyone keeps doing this endless cycle, and then it ends at the same thing. I mean, you see it in the mid lane meta right now. No one picks the champions that beat or make problems for Orianna, Victor, Azir, all these other things, right? Bot lane. Jinx was viable for the longest fucking time. Holy shit. But no one picked her, right? Varus has been viable for how fucking long? No one played him. You can just keep going, dude. Pro players are fucking dumb at figuring out what is and isn't viable. Their perception of things is fucking wrong. They can't even itemize correctly. We want to think that they conclude what the best picks are.
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem was also just like from a pro player perspective, it's like learning how to play with different champions, right? Like if you learn how to play with a Hecarim, you can play with an Udyr, you can play like all of them operate the same way. Even Lilia kind of operates the same way. It's the same pattern, right? And I feel like generally what happens is people will try a different pick, and if the game that they try to pick on goes poorly, it's just done. It's like, okay, like we experimented, it didn't work out, on to the next thing. Whereas like to master like a lot of these different styles, because you need to play differently with a Nocturne than you do with a Hecarim or an Udyr, right? Like the early, like your level 4 is way worse. You have to like be willing to play around Nocturne ultimate. there's a lot of different like mind games that you could use with the Nocturne ultimate, like how you finish objectives, how you deny vision, how you team fight. One thing specifically that they do a lot in LPL is they abuse the vision range of Nocturne a lot more. So they pair Nocturne with long range AD carries, because essentially you Nocturne ult, and even if you don't go in on the Nocturne ult, your AD carry can hit and the other AD can't hit. And that's enough of an advantage where like you're just going to win the fight off it. You don't even have to like reactivate your R, but it's a different playstyle and it's less intuitive. And to me, I just feel like once they get this late in the season, it's just about like perfecting what they're comfortable on rather than like going outside of the box. And I mean, they didn't really like C9 didn't really need to do anything too crazy in order to win. I mean, sure, they did that good level one, that good level 1 in game 5. But outside of that, like in terms of like the champion picks and like the meta, the only person I really saw like a lot of variety from was Perks, right? Like he was the only one that was like pulling out different styles in a best of 5. Like he played a Seraphine game, played Silas, he played Victor. Like it was just, I mean, it's just like he's the one that's actually being willing to play those different styles. And the other thing is like, I don't think you need to play every style at its like best level for it to be useful or like viable in a series, right? Like if you play a comp that's really good for the game at like a B tier level, you can beat a team that is playing a comp that's worse than you if they're playing it like an A or like an S tier level. And I feel like not enough people are willing to like put themselves out of their comfort zone in order to like gain an advantage.